June 1972, Bruce Lee attended a premiere party at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. His agent had encouraged him to come, the kind of networking event that matters for a career still finding its footing in Hollywood. Bruce was polite, shook hands, made small talk, but events like this drained him. He found a quieter spot near the backstage door, away from the jazz band, the champagne trays, and the carefully performed conversations filling the main room. Paul Newman was there. When he spotted Bruce, he stopped. His kids had watched The Green Hornet every week. He asked about the stunts, about breaking into American films, mentioned coming by the school in Chinatown. Then, his publicist appeared, and Newman was pulled away toward a camera crew from Entertainment Tonight. Following behind Newman was his bodyguard, Ray Collins, a former defensive lineman at USC, drafted by the Rams. His career ended at 24 when his knee gave out, torn ACL, torn meniscus. After that, construction work, club security, and eventually private protection for wealthy clients. He had been with Newman 8 months. Ray had watched the exchange between Newman and Bruce. He had an opinion about martial arts. He had always had that opinion. Big men who had spent their lives using size as leverage often do. He had seen Bruce on television in The Green Hornet and thought it looked staged, designed for cameras, not for actual confrontation. He turned back after Newman walked away. "That kung fu stuff you do," Ray said. "Does it actually work?" Bruce knew the question well. "It works if you train it properly, but in a real fight, against someone who really wants to hurt you, when someone who's not cooperating with your moves? Depends on the situation, the environment, the training. But yes, it can work." Ray shook his head. "No offense, but you're what, 140 pounds? Someone my size gets their hands on you. All the kung fu in the world doesn't matter." "You might be surprised," Ray laughed, not warmly. "I've been in real fights, street fights, bar fights, on the field for years. Size always wins, always has. Only if the smaller person doesn't know what they're doing." Ray stepped closer, using his height and mass the way he always had. A physical argument he had never needed to put into words. "You saying you know what you're doing?" "I'm saying I've trained, spent my whole life learning how to make a smaller body effective against a larger one. Against other actors who pull their punches? Yeah, that's not real fighting. I've trained with boxers, wrestlers, judoka, karate practitioners, different sizes, different approaches. And you beat them? Sometimes they beat me. That's how you learn. By testing, by failing, by adjusting." Ray laughed again, louder. Other people nearby began to look over. "So you admit you lose sometimes, to people smaller than me, and you think you could take me?" "I'm not saying I could take you. I'm saying size isn't as decisive as you think it is." Sounds like a lot of words to avoid the truth, that in a real fight I'd destroy you, that all your fancy technique falls apart when someone actually fights back. Bruce didn't answer right away. He recognized the pattern, men who had built their identity around physical dominance, for whom a challenge to that identity registered as a threat. Ray wanted something proven, wanted to feel what he already believed confirmed. "Tell you what," Ray said, voice climbing. A few heads turned. "Why don't we test it, right here? You show me some of that kung fu. I'll stand still and take it. If you can move me, I'll apologize. I'll tell everyone here Bruce Lee's kung fu is real." Bruce glanced across the room. Newman was under camera lights, mid-interview. Entertainment Tonight, press everywhere. Whatever happened here, the story would travel. Fight in public and the headline writes itself. Bruce Lee involved in incident at premiere party. Walk away, and a different story spreads just as far. Both versions cause damage. There was a third option. "Not here," Bruce said quietly. "Too many cameras. You want to test this? We do it somewhere private. No audience, no press, just you and me." Ray smiled. "Fine by me." There was a hallway behind the backstage area that led to the loading docks. Service corridors, storage, the functional and unglamorous machinery of the building. Concrete floors, brick walls, high ceilings, no cameras. They walked back. Word traveled faster than they did. By the time they reached an open space near the loading dock, 6 people had followed. A stuntman Bruce recognized from Universal, 2 stagehands, someone's assistant, a lighting technician, and a venue security guard. Small enough group to keep it contained, large enough to serve as witnesses. Ray took off his jacket and handed it to one of the stagehands. He rolled up his sleeves. His forearms were thick, veined, the result of consistent training. For he had been to the gym that morning. The pump was still visible. He set his feet wider than shoulder width, lowered his center of gravity, bent his knees slightly, and crossed his arms over his chest. A modified football stance. Years of holding ground against men who outweighed most people by 100 pounds. "How do you want to do this?" he asked. "I'll push you," Bruce said. "Just push. If I move you, you apologize, like you said. If I don't, I'll admit you were right," Ray laughed. A push? That's it? Give it your best shot. Bruce stepped to within 3 feet of him. He studied Ray's stance without appearing to study it. Weight distribution, balance, foot position, the location of his center of mass. Then he raised his hands, open, not closed, relaxed, fingers spread naturally, his weight shifted, his feet adjusted. His breathing slowed and steadied. He stepped forward. Both palms made contact with the center of Ray's chest, directly over the sternum. For a moment, nothing happened. Ray smiled. Then Bruce's back foot pressed into the concrete, not a stomp, just deliberate measured pressure. Force traveled upward through his leg, through his calf and knee and thigh, into his hip. His hip opened and rotated, transferring energy through his core. His abdomen engaged. The force continued upward through his spine, into his chest, through his shoulders, along his arms, and expressed itself through a single point of contact, his palms against Ray's chest, every joint coordinated, every muscle fired in sequence. The sound was sharp and absolute. It bounced off the brick walls and returned louder than it had left. Everyone in the loading dock flinched. Ray's feet left the ground. All 350 pounds of him left the ground. He traveled backward, not sliding, not stumbling, airborne, covering 4 or 5 feet before his back met the brick wall. The impact was heavy and dull. The wall shook. Dust fell from above. An existing crack in the brick became visible, spreading slightly from the concussion. Ray slid down the wall and sat on the concrete floor. His legs were splayed, his arms were limp, his mouth was open. He was trying to breathe and couldn't. The diaphragm, struck with sudden force through the sternum, had seized. The signal between brain and lungs had been interrupted. He didn't know it was temporary. He pressed his hands against his chest and his face went from red to darker, panic rising as his body refused to respond. Bruce kneeled beside him. His expression was calm and steady. "Breathe slow," he said quietly. "In through your nose, count to 3. Out through your mouth, count to 3. It'll come back. Just follow my instructions." Ray tried. A thin breath, like air through a pinhole. He held it, counted, released it. Another breath, slightly easier. Then another. The diaphragm was recovering. After roughly 20 seconds, Ray could breathe close to normally. Each breath still hurt, a deep internal ache, as though something inside had been displaced. He looked up at Bruce. The 6 witnesses had not moved or spoken. A stuntman with 20 years in the business, who had worked on 50 films with the best stunt coordinators in Hollywood, stood with his mouth open. "How did you do that?" he finally asked, barely above a whisper. "Physics," Bruce said. "Leverage, timing, body mechanics." His body wasn't prepared for force arriving from that angle, through that method, so it reacted by shutting down to protect itself. Ray used the wall to push himself upright. His legs were unsteady. His balance was off. Everything felt rearranged. Paul Newman appeared at the entrance to the loading dock. Someone had gone to get him, told him his bodyguard and Bruce Lee were in a back hallway, that there might be trouble. Newman took in the scene, Ray against the wall, visibly shaken, still breathing carefully. Bruce, standing a few feet away, composed. 6 witnesses frozen in place, the crack in the brick wall visible from where he stood. "What the hell happened here?" Ray's voice was rough. "I challenged him, wanted to test if Kung Fu works. He showed me it does." "You okay?" "Yeah, I think so. That wasn't what I expected." Newman looked at the crack in the wall. At Ray. "Did you hit your head?" "My back hit the wall, hard." "You need a doctor?" "No, just bruised. Ego more than anything." Newman turned to Bruce. "You hurt him?" "No, I controlled it. I used maybe 20% of full force. If I hadn't pulled it, he'd be in an ambulance. Possibly worse." Newman looked at Ray. 20% did that to you?" Ray nodded. He didn't speak. The implication didn't need elaboration. "I'm sorry this happened," Bruce said to Newman. "Your man challenged me and put me in a position where walking away would have damaged my reputation, and by extension, the credibility of what I teach. I tried to redirect it, suggested we not do this. He insisted." "I did insist," Ray said. "This is on me. I thought I knew better. I was wrong." He proved it clearly, in a way I can't argue with. Newman helped Ray toward the center of the space, away from the wall. Ray moved slowly. Each step registered pain. His back, his chest, something deeper that would take days to identify. "I apologize for this," Newman said to Bruce. "Ray's job is to be protective. Sometimes that instinct runs past what the situation requires." He didn't know. Most people don't. They see what's in films and assume it's choreography. They can't be blamed for being skeptical. Newman nodded. Then, after a moment, "You said 20%. You've done this at full force before?" A few times, when the situation required it, when a demonstration wasn't sufficient. What happens at full force? Bruce paused, choosing words carefully. People get hurt badly. Broken ribs, internal bleeding. On one occasion, someone's heart stopped. We had to resuscitate him. The witnesses reacted, a few gasps, quiet murmured words. This man, standing calmly in front of them in a dress shirt, was capable of stopping a heart with a single push, and had chosen not to use that capability tonight. Had chosen to use just enough. That restraint registered more clearly than the force had. "Can you teach that?" Newman asked. "What you just did?" "The technique, yes. Anyone can learn the technique. The understanding behind it takes years. Most people want results without the work, want the power without the practice." "How long did it take you?" "I've been training since I was 7, 25 years, and I'm still learning." Newman was quiet for a moment. 25 years for one push. "No. Need 25 years to understand the principles that make the push possible. The push itself is simple, just application. The understanding is what takes time." Ray had recovered enough to stand without support. His body felt the way it would after a significant collision, which in practical terms was what had happened. He looked at Bruce. "I owe you an apology. What I said about Kung Fu being fake, about size being everything, I was wrong, and you proved it in a way I can't rationalize away." "You weren't entirely wrong. Size does matter. In most situations, bigger is an advantage. But that's only true when skill levels are comparable. When there's a significant difference in skill, size matters less. Still matters, but less." "How much less?" "Depends. Against someone with no training, size might account for 30% of the outcome. Against someone with basic training, 50%. Against someone with serious training, 70%. Against someone with mastery, size becomes nearly irrelevant. Not completely, but close." Ray absorbed this, the framework he had used to understand physical confrontation, built across 20 years of football and fighting, reinforced every day by the simple fact of being the largest man in most rooms, had just been shown to be incomplete. Not wrong entirely. Incomplete. "Can I train with you?" he asked. "I don't want to feel that way again. I want to understand what you understand." Bruce studied him for a moment, looking for the quality of the request, whether it was ego trying to recover or something more genuine. "Why do you want to learn?" "Because everything I thought I knew turned out to be incomplete. 20 years of football, of fighting, of being the biggest person in the room, none of it prepared me for what just happened. I want to fill in the gaps." "It's not about becoming complete. Nobody reaches that. It's about becoming more complete, understanding more, questioning what you already think you know." "Then that's what I want." "Come to the school on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 7 o'clock, Chinatown, above the restaurant on Ord Street. If you're serious, I'll teach you. Most people quit after a few weeks." "I won't quit." "We'll see." They shook hands. It was a different kind of handshake than the one they hadn't had before. Not a posture, not a challenge. As just two people who understood each other more clearly than they had an hour ago. The witnesses dispersed quietly, returning to the party in ones and twos. But the conversations started immediately, corner whispers that spread across the room. By the end of the night, half the attendees had heard some version of what happened in the loading dock. Details were already changing. Some versions had Ray knocked unconscious. Some said the wall had broken through. Some credited pressure points or secret techniques. The truth was buried under layers of elaboration before midnight. By the following day, the story had moved through studios, agencies, and the stunt community. By the end of the week, it had reached martial arts schools across California, then across the country. The phone at Bruce's school in Chinatown rang constantly with people wanting to train, wanting to understand what they had heard. For Ray Collins, the aftermath was harder. 2 weeks after the incident, he left the job with Newman. Each time he tried to assess a threat, the core function of his work, he found himself returned to that moment of helplessness. The identity he had carried since his football career had rested on physical dominance, and that foundation had been removed in 3 seconds. His confidence didn't break all at once, it eroded, but he showed up at the school the following Tuesday. 7 o'clock. He climbed the stairs above the restaurant in Chinatown, nervous, uncertain, and committed. Bruce was teaching a class of 15 students, different sizes, different backgrounds. Ray joined. It was humbling from the beginning. His size, which had always been the asset, became a liability. His strength, trained over 2 decades, became an obstacle. To learn, he had to unlearn first. He kept coming back. Tuesday and Thursday, week after week and month after month. Slowly, the principle stopped being intellectual and became physical, understood in his muscles and in his responses. 6 months in, Bruce had him demonstrate for the class. Ray positioned himself, aligned his body, and generated force upward from his feet through his core and into his arms. His target stumbled backward, didn't leave his feet, didn't hit anything, but moved. Actually moved. Ray looked at his hands. I felt it, the force traveling through. It wasn't just my arms, it was everything. That's the beginning, Bruce said. You're starting to understand, but there's more. There always is. Good. I like not knowing. It means there's more to learn. Paul Newman never forgot what he had seen in the loading dock that night. In later interviews, he would mention Bruce, carefully, without naming the specific incident, without specifics, when the subject of martial arts came up. He spoke about skill, about capability, about witnessing something that had changed what he thought was physically possible. He made good on what he had offered at the party. He recommended Bruce to directors, opened doors. The roles were supporting parts at first, but they gave Bruce the chance to demonstrate something real on screen. Not staged choreography designed to look good at camera angles, but actual technique made visible. The stuntman who had been in the loading dock became one of Bruce's closest collaborators on his films. He has spent 20 years developing choreography, and what he saw that night reoriented how he thought about the work. The fights they constructed together looked different from what audiences were used to, more grounded, more direct, more authentic, because they were built around actual capability rather than illusion. That stuntman spent the rest of his career telling the story to young stunt coordinators and action directors, to anyone who would listen. Everyone asks if Bruce Lee was really that good, he would say, if his skills were real or just film craft. I was there. I saw it. He was better than his movies show, because films have to hold back, have to stay inside what an audience will accept as believable. What he could actually do, what I watched him do to a 350-pound man in a loading dock, was beyond what the films ever showed. And it was real. Years after Bruce died, too young before the full scope of what he had started could be seen, the debate continued. Was it real? Was it exaggerated? Could a man of his size actually generate that kind of force from a standing position with no wind-up? The 6 witnesses knew. Ray knew. Newman knew. The crack in the brick wall, which remained visible through years of use before the building was eventually renovated, offered its own answer. The truth of what happened in that loading dock doesn't require debate or defense. It happened as described, perhaps even more completely than the stories convey, because the stories naturally focus on the force itself, not on the spectacle of a large man leaving his feet. What they tend to miss is the other thing, the control. Bruce Lee used 20% of his available force that night. He chose 20% deliberately, enough to demonstrate the point beyond any reasonable dispute, not enough to break ribs, stop a heart, or cause harm that would follow Ray Collins for the rest of his life. That choice required more skill than the push did. The discipline to use exactly what the situation required, and nothing beyond it, was the real demonstration. That was the lesson Paul Newman's bodyguard actually learned that night. Not that Bruce Lee was powerful. Ray had felt powerful men before and knew, in a physical sense, what that meant. What he learned was that Bruce Lee was controlled, that his mastery was not of technique, but of himself. The true mastery, as Ray would later put it to his own students, isn't measured by what you're capable of doing. It's measured by what you choose to do, and what you choose not to do. That understanding, absorbed through the concrete floor of a loading dock in a moment of complete physical helplessness, changed the direction of Ray's life, changed how he understood fighting and how he understood himself. And in the end, he was grateful for it, because the most important lessons tend to arrive through humility, through being taken apart so that something more complete can be reassembled. That is what happened backstage at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in June 1972. Not a fight, not a confrontation that got out of hand, a demonstration, precise, controlled. He conducted in private before 6 witnesses of what happens when real understanding meets the assumption that size is sufficient. Power without control is just force. Size without skill is just mass. Confidence without understanding is just certainty waiting to be corrected. 3 truths, demonstrated in seconds, remembered for lifetimes.